Hello everyone, this is Shadow News, and I'm sorry it took me so long to sit down and make this video. I just have so much to say that I know it will take me many hours to say it. Maybe it will be one very long video or probably several videos. And I'll start with the things that most people around the world probably know little about, because the media, most of it, are not being objective. They're reporting in a biased way, mostly from what's happening in Gaza, which I can understand because there is more destruction there, but you have to remember most of those buildings you see are getting destroyed are mostly empty because Israel always gives a warning for civilians to evacuate before it destroys anything. And the reason that it has to destroy so many things is that all of Gaza is basically a giant missile base disguised as a city. Like, all the underground of it is a military base. And the easy proof of that is that Israeli cities are constantly being bombarded by rockets every single day. Thousands of rockets have been launched, and they still do it even a month after the war started. So they're not even running out of missiles. And strangely, as much as they cry about running out of food and so on, they never seem to run out of rockets, because the fact is they keep firing rockets every single day at most Israeli cities, and all the people in those cities have to constantly run to shelter, because even though we have the Iron Dome, but it's not perfect. It doesn't destroy all the incoming rockets, and also the debris fall down, and so people have to constantly run into shelters. And so people cannot go to work, people cannot go to school, and all of that. And so that alone, I think, would be a reason enough to bomb back. Like, even without that attack that happened on the 7th of October, which I will get to, that was really some nasty atrocities, probably worse than the Holocaust. Like, the things I saw, and I saw just a few clips, I couldn't bring myself to watch all of them, but the few things I saw and the descriptions by other eyewitnesses are just so horrible, because it's not just about killing. Like, they literally mutilated, abused, raped, killed babies. Like, one horrifying story is that they put a live baby into an oven, in a kitchen oven, and turned it on, and the rescue team found it later, and they took babies out of pregnant women and so on. I didn't personally saw most of that stuff. Probably one day I will, so I cannot confirm 100% that all of it happened as described, but the fact is that 1,400 civilians have been butchered by Hamas, and so that is indisputable. Hamas themselves don't deny it, like, they were proud of it. They were themselves publishing, most of those videos are published by Hamas because they are proud of it. And so, and most of the population in Gaza was celebrating it when it happened. And so, I see some anti-Israeli people kind of picking on that. Oh, they didn't really behead babies, they just stabbed them, and so it's Israeli propaganda. They didn't literally behead babies, there is no evidence of that. What difference does it make? The babies were still killed by Hamas. So what if it was by beheading or by stabbing? Does it really matter that much? I think it does matter overall, because the level of atrocities is what I say makes them worse than the Nazis, because the level of sadism they did is even worse. And I never thought that could happen nowadays, not just with Israel and the Arabs, just overall humanity, or humanity overall. I thought progressed beyond that. This is medieval level torture and stuff like that. So that was horrible. But even without all those events, just the fact that Hamas keeps firing rockets at Israel, at Israeli cities, deliberately aiming at civilians, that alone is a war crime. So what, we're supposed not to respond to that? Oh, because we have Iron Dome, so we have to just sit back and take it. Which was the case. Actually, that's what we did for 10 or something years. We just responded very minimally, like not to harm anyone, because we didn't want to escalate, we didn't want to risk our soldiers, we didn't want to harm civilians on the other side, and so we just targeted empty buildings. We always told people, leave that building, that's a Hamas building, and we blew up an empty building, and we thought that would deter Hamas, because they lost some assets. But what do they care when the world is financing all that rebuilding? And then all the materials and everything that everyone sent them, they use it for the underground bases. And it literally became like a giant missile base underneath the city. And all their headquarters are in those places that they know are less likely that Israel will be able to hit, because it's under hospitals, under schools, all those places which are most heavily populated and most sensitive, all the targets which they know that Israel will not dare to attack. That's where they built all their headquarters and most of their missile bases. That's probably the biggest targets, which Israel is still not really attacking. There was one report that Israel bombed the hospital, and the whole world media immediately reported it, because it's the health ministry of Gaza which reported it, so it must be true. Only the health ministry of Gaza is Hamas. The Gazans elected Hamas. Hamas is the government of Gaza. And so the whole world media immediately attacked Israel. They said they killed 500 people in a hospital, and it turns out the hospital wasn't even hit, and there were like 5 people harmed, and it wasn't even Israel because it was their own rockets. Like they launched so many rockets that some of them misfire and fall in their own territory, and then they still blame Israel. And Israel is not attacking those main hospitals, which are actually Hamas headquarters underneath the hospital. That's where most of the Hamas are probably. And Israel doesn't attack them. Also, maybe not just because of not harming their civilians, but also because they took hostages. They actually kidnapped babies, women, pregnant women, old ladies. They picked civilians, including little children whose parents they killed in front of them, and then they kidnapped them into the Gaza Strip and are probably holding them in those tunnels. So Israel is at an impossible situation. So what are we supposed to do? Just surrender to Hamas? Just release all their prisoners? And all the prisoners that they want released are murderers. Those are the people who previously murdered civilians in Israel. Hamas is the same organization that always attacked civilians, always tried to maximize civilian casualties. They are terrorists. And the world media is not even calling them that. BBC and all of that, they always say militants. They don't even want to say the word terrorist. And so completely biased media, they don't even talk about the fact that most of Israel is under constant rocket attacks. They don't report about it. Okay, not so many people die on our side because we have defenses, because we have shelters, because we invested in defending our civilians. And so because of that, we are not allowed to respond. We're supposed to just sit back and take it. Absolutely ridiculous. Israel is always trying to avoid civilian casualties. They tell civilians leave that area, and then, which I think maybe is a mistake, because the Hamas terrorists are also hearing that and also evacuating, and most of that population supports Hamas, and so maybe we shouldn't always be warning them. And so I hope in those important cases there will be no warning. If you have to kill some major Hamas leader or a major target where they're firing rockets from, are you telling me the people there don't know it? The people who see the rockets flying off from behind their hospital or behind their schoolyard or whatever, they don't know there are rockets there. So I think, there is a huge amount of distraction, and I know it looks bad, and that's why most people who don't know all the facts, they immediately blame Israel. The media only shows that other side of the destruction. And also they blame, historically the occupation and all of that. Also ignoring the details, because occupation of Gaza ended in 2005. Israel pulled out completely. There was no Israeli presence inside, and Israel was not controlling the border between Gaza and Egypt. And Israel kept supplying everything to them even when they were shooting at us. Just 1 year after we pulled out, Hamas took over. They killed all the Palestinian Authority people. They threw them off rooftops. They took over after the election in which they won, but they killed the opposition. And since then, they've been firing rockets at Israeli cities. They've been launching all kinds of balloons with devices that can make fire to try to burn all the fields of Israel around it. And they always try to build tunnels into Israel, not to smuggle any goods in. All the goods are coming in anyway from Israel. Even when they were firing rockets at Israel, Israel still provided electricity, water, which only now they stopped doing only to the north of Gaza, where most of the Hamas are, and to encourage the population to move south to clear the area. And so Israel is providing all of that to south of Gaza, but not north of Gaza. So anyway, most of those years, Israel have been providing everything to them, even as they are attacking Israel. Even though Israel is not occupying them, they're not responsible for them anymore. Israel pulled out to the 67 borders, and so the whole world told Israel, all those attacks which were before, it was because of the occupation, because you're in there and controlling them. And so Israel pulled back, no longer controlling them, and things just got worse and worse, because without the control of Israel, they could build all these terror networks, all those tunnels, bring in missiles, build their own missiles. All of Gaza is basically one giant terror base, aimed only for a war with Israel. That's their whole purpose in life, for years. And Israel, for some reason, which now is obviously a mistake, thought that we will just defend hard, and so we'll keep punishing them. If they attack us, we'll destroy some buildings, and then it will not be worth it. We'll do like a carrot and a stick. If they behave, then we'll give them more money, we'll allow workers to come into Israel, we'll allow all kinds of concessions to them, and we'll give them money, and we'll pay them off, and then they'll behave. And that was the conception, which was a disastrous one, because it just allowed them time to just become stronger and stronger, while their ultimate aim never changes, which is the destruction of Israel. That is in their official charter. They want to take over all of Israel and to kill all Jews. That's in their charter. That's their whole mission in life. they've always been aiming to maximize civilian casualties. This is not something new. Even back in the 90s, they were doing suicide bombers. They sent suicide bombers to blow themselves up to kill as many civilians as possible in buses, in restaurants, and so on. They were always aiming to kill as many as possible. And then they started firing rockets at Israeli cities, which is a war crime, directly aiming at civilians. And so Israel built a missile defense system, and so 99% of those missiles are taken out. And so Israel said to itself, okay, we can live with that. We'll have the defenses now, so we don't have to go to full war with them. Because full war means endangering your own soldiers, killing a bunch of their civilians, which will blame it on us, that we're massacring them, even though they are the ones attacking us. And so Israel preferred to just be on the defensive. It was easier, it was simpler. And so even though it cost, billions to build all the defenses and the special fence that can detect it if tunnels are dug underneath it and all of that. And eventually they didn't go underneath, they just broke the fence. They just attacked with thousands of terrorists came over on a religious day, because just like in the Yom Kippur War, when the Arabs attacked Israel on the most sacred day, when they knew that most of the army will be on vacation and all of that, and by complete surprise, and so now they did it again. It was not on Yom Kippur, but it was on another holiday, which was also on a Saturday morning, to catch Israel by surprise. And there was definitely a lot of negligence in Israel. Like, there will be a full investigation later. How was this even allowed to happen? How was the intelligence so bad? And how come the defenses were so weak, and so on. So, I made videos in the past. A few years ago, I made videos when there were all those demonstrations, so-called demonstrations near the fence, and they were trying to break through, and Israel snipers shot their legs. They shot a few people in the leg, and they bled out and died, and there was a huge international outcry. Oh, Israel is massacring demonstrators, peaceful demonstrators. And obviously, they were not just demonstrators, they were just, Hamas is never in their military uniform. They're always dressed as civilians, and so they're always doing all these kinds of things and pretending to be just civilians, just demonstrating, which is a lie. I guess some of them might have been civilians, but this was admitted by Hamas itself, that all those people killed on the fence back then, I'm talking about years ago, they were Hamas members trying to break in. And even some leftist people in my country, they complained as well. They said, oh, we should use non-lethal means and all of that. And I suggested back then to some of those leftist parties, let's give you control, let you be prime minister for 1 week, and we'll see what happens. Like, let them do whatever they want, and we'll see what happens. And what will happen is they will break through the fence and go to all the nearby villages and just kill all the people there, which is exactly what happened now. And so I suggested back then, why not just simply put a minefield on the border so people couldn't approach it? And that way you cannot be blamed for it. As long as you put a sign on the other side that says there's a minefield there, if someone chooses to go there, then that's their own fault they got blown up. You cannot blame Israel for defending its own border if it's not snipers just killing people deliberately. If it's just a minefield and you give a warning, then it would have avoided what happened now. Because what happened now is that because the defenses were so pathetic, huge misconception that Hamas is deterred, that we pay them off, that we have good defenses, they won't dare to attack us again. And their whole mission in life was to do that. To me it was obvious that one day we'll have to just go in and just clean out all the terror infrastructure. There is no other way. I guess if the defenses were better, we could have avoided it for some time longer, but eventually they would find other ways to get through it. And so there is no perfect defense. We'll always find a way to get by any obstacle. Any man-made obstacle can always be circumvented somehow, and so we cannot just be on the defensive, and we cannot keep all our army on readiness all the time. It's impossible. And so this was unavoidable. And I know some conspiracy theorists will say, oh, Israel allowed this attack to happen to give it the excuse to attack back and all of that, but that's complete nonsense. Israel is too small of a country for any such secrets, and there will be a full investigation for the negligence in the defense. But anyway, now we're at war, and again, not just because of what they did, but because they first of all, they've been attacking us for years with rockets, and they're still doing it till this day. Even a month after the war, even if after half of Gaza was destroyed, they are still able to fire rockets from there into Israel. So what does that tell you? How many rockets do they have? And they keep doing that. They're not running out of it. And so it's crazy. And so another big mistake by Israel was trusting Egypt, who we have a peace treaty with, that they will prevent any smuggling of weapons into Gaza. And we see how that turned out. And so that was maybe the biggest mistake when we pulled out of Gaza. We also cleared the border, so they have an open border with Egypt, And for some reason, always when they cry about Israel and the siege that Israel put on Gaza, which only started after they started shooting rockets, Israel put a siege to prevent certain materials, to limit certain materials, to prevent what happened anyway eventually, of them building all these rockets and the tunnels and all of that. But they always had an open border with Egypt. And so how come they attack Israel because of the so-called siege, but they never attacked Egypt? How come Egypt is not guilty of the same thing when they also have a border with Gaza? How come only Israel is responsible to supplying them and all of that? So none of this makes any sense if you actually think about the facts. And that is something that no one is talking about. So why is Egypt not to blame? And Egypt is the one who allowed all those weapons to come into Gaza, which they now launch at Israel. And so I think eventually, maybe if there is no other way, Israel will have to take over that border as well. And then there will be a siege, and then there will be an actual occupation, what they've been crying about. They brought it on themselves. Like, they keep complaining about the so-called occupation, and now they're forcing Israel to do it. It's also funny how some people, even some Israelis, say that all of this is happening because of the occupation, even though there was no occupation of Gaza, but we still occupy some other Palestinians in other areas, and so because they're also Palestinians, that's why they're still fighting us. Well, how do you explain Hezbollah then in Lebanon? How come Hezbollah is also attacking us? Which, by the way, the media is not reporting, but Hezbollah, since this all started, they've been constantly attacking all the cities on the border with Lebanon. They've been launching rockets at Israeli cities and killing Israeli civilians. And no one is reporting about it. So Hezbollah are attacking Israel, and Israel is not occupying any part of Lebanon, and is not putting any siege on Lebanon or nothing like that. And yet Hezbollah are also still attacking Israel all the time, and also their mission in life is to destroy Israel. That's their declared goal. They even declared openly they want to kill all Jews. And all of that is because of radical religious fanaticism and ideology, and it's all run by Iran. Iran is run by an Islamic revolution regime which hates Israel just because it's a Jewish state, not because of anything Israel did to Iran. And so Iran is controlling and arming all these little groups to attack Israel. So anyway, all those people who defend Hamas saying it's because of the occupation, well, how do you explain Hezbollah then? Hezbollah is the same kind of group as Hamas. They're also religious fanatics. They also want to kill civilians and always aim at civilians while hiding behind their own civilians. And they're constantly attacking Israel as well. And Israel doesn't occupy Lebanon. So what's their excuse? And so there is none. The excuse is, they're helping out the Palestinians. Well, how does that help them out if Lebanon will get destroyed? So don't cry when Lebanon will be occupied, or part of it will be occupied because of these attacks. And then you'll say, we're attacking because of the occupation. But there is no occupation right now. So why are you attacking? So if you don't want an occupation, then don't attack. And then there will be peace. There will be peace. Just leave Israel alone and there is peace. But you cannot, because that's your religious duty to kill Jews. And so that's the facts. That's what people are not talking about. Okay, it's not totally black and white. Israel did some bad things in the past. It's not total justice. Okay, so what do you want now? So now you're attacking Israel unprovokedly, Saturday morning, 7th of October. A complete quiet on all the borders. Israel is not attacking Gaza. It's on the 67 borders with Gaza. So what's your problem? So you attack Israeli citizens, you kidnap babies, you mutilate and murder and rape and torture people and burn people alive, and all the stories which I don't even want to repeat. I just watched a few of those clips and it made me sick, literally sick what they did. Like, they literally kidnapped little kids, took them into Gaza, and we see that it's Gazan civilians who celebrate all of this. And they literally took a little child from Israel and put them to the Palestinian children, and those children are abusing the child and laughing at him and beating him up, and he's totally helpless, and after they killed his parents. So that's the kind of people we're dealing with. It's total barbarism, it's medieval stuff, what they did to pregnant women and all of that. What did they think will happen? Like, what did they actually think would happen? So they couldn't help themselves. They had the opportunity because there was that musical festival pretty close to Gaza, and so that's why they did it. They were probably planning to do it together with Hezbollah. Hezbollah also said they want to do something similar, so probably the plan was to do it from both sides, but because there was that musical festival, and Hamas was worried that they wanted to keep everything secret, so even their own people didn't know when exactly are they going to do something like this. So because of that festival, they couldn't give up that opportunity, because there were thousands of civilians there, so they wanted to exploit that day to kill as many people as possible. And that's why they started it prematurely, probably without Hezbollah knowing. That's why Hezbollah also didn't attack. Otherwise it would be on two fronts. So luckily, in a way, that festival maybe saved Israel, because that way Hamas did it prematurely without Hezbollah's knowledge. And that will now allow Israel to focus just on Gaza, because Hezbollah were caught off guard, and now they are attacking Israel from the north, and For some reason, Israel is only responding in a limited way because Hezbollah are also not attacking all of Israel right now. So Israel doesn't want to start another huge war with Hezbollah, so they prefer to deal with Gaza first, which I get, but still hundreds of thousands of people have evacuated from the border of Lebanon into Israel, as well as near Gaza into Israel. And so again, the world media is only talking about the poor Palestinian refugees who have to clear out because Israel simply wants to protect their life. They tell them, move out of those areas of Hamas so that we can fight Hamas without you being harmed. And they don't want to do it. They say, oh, they want to drive us away and all of that, which is lies. I'm sure some people in Israel would want to do that, but that's not what the official government will do, and so that's complete BS. And the whole media says, oh, those pure refugees. But what about the refugees inside Israel? That because of all these attacks by all sides, people had to also flee their homes. So there are hundreds of thousands of refugees inside of Israel because of these attacks on our borders. And yet no one is talking about that. That's totally okay. That we're under rocket fire constantly, that we have to be in shelters, the entire country has to be in shelters all the time, and for a whole month Gaza is firing rockets non-stop at Israeli cities. And no one is even mentioning that in the media. They only show their casualties on their side. And also they believe automatically all the lies of Hamas. Oh, 10,000 civilians have been killed. How do you know that's the exact number? How do you know how many of them were actually Hamas members? I would say probably more than half were direct Hamas members. Because that's what Israel is aiming at. They've been warning civilians. All those who chose to stay, they're probably the fighters who want to fight Israel or launch rockets, and they're the ones getting killed. And so most of those casualties are probably Hamas, and that's a good thing. Those are the ones Israel is targeting. Of course, some civilians probably will get hurt, but again, who is to blame? Who started this war? Who is hiding behind the civilians? So what do you want Israel to do? Just sit back and take it? Just sit under the rockets and under all these attacks and just not do anything? So what can we do? When they deliberately hide behind the civilians. That's their whole strategy, because they knew that Israel will not attack the hospitals and the schools and all of those places. That's where their headquarters are deliberately. And they're riding around in the ambulances, they're hiding behind patients, behind doctors. And so that's the reason all of this is happening. So maybe Israel, if Israel made more concessions in the past or behaved differently in the past, maybe we could have avoided all of this. Maybe, what now? We cannot now go back to that. We cannot now just stop the war and surrender and just give them all their so-called prisoners who are all convicted murderers. We're supposed to release them to get our civilians back, the women and children and babies they kidnapped, and so they're holding them hostage to try to get murderers out of prison. So people who support this anywhere are just crazy. You either don't know the facts, or you're immoral, or you're just ignorant. You're just, all that destruction in Gaza, so Israel is to blame, Israel is the evil one. But what started all of this, and who is doing what? Like, look at the whole picture. And also for some people it's because, the Gaza is so small and weak and Israel is so big and powerful. Yeah, only if you look so close by. But if you look outside of the map for a second, and you'll realize it's actually Iran behind all of this, and Iran is bigger than Israel, and it's the one arming all of these groups around it. So that's the real picture. Israel is actually the victim. Israel is actually the small country fighting against much bigger aggressors all around it. And they've been firing rockets from Yemen, or the Houthi rebels who are controlled by Iran are also shooting at Israel. And there were Israeli tourists who get killed in Arab countries, like there was a few in Egypt who got killed by Egyptians. And just recently there was a pro-Hamas demonstration somewhere, and they just went and killed some Jews just because they're Jews. Because, if you're a Jew, you automatically support the Israeli government, and so you're to blame for that. So they're doing what they blame Israel of doing. They always blame Israel for collective punishment and all of that, but that's what the other side is doing. Just the racist ideology of driving out all the Jews, that no Jews should be allowed to live in a Muslim land and all of that. Is that not racism? And Jews don't behave like that. Despite what some people say, there is apartheid in Israel. That's all BS, because there are Israeli Arab citizens with full equal rights. They drive in the same buses, they go to the same schools, they're working as doctors, there are Knesset members and members of the government who are Arabs, even Arab soldiers. And a lot of the people who got killed in that festival were also Arabs. And some of the soldiers who got killed were Arabs. And just a few days ago, I went to a mall, and the guard in the door of the mall was an Arab, and he asked me if I have any weapons before he lets me in. So, do you see how absurd it is? It is Israel, which is a multicultural, multi-ethnic democracy with equal rights to all people of all religions, and it's the other side that has only one religion, one people, and they want to drive everyone else out. So who is the apartheid? Who is the one who is racist? Really, I'm not saying there are no racist people in Israel or even some members of the government, which I'm against. I was always against all of that. So, okay, Israel is not perfect, but the other side is much worse. They literally want to murder everyone who is not them, who is not of their religion. And they even kill Israeli Arabs in their attacks. When they launch rockets at Haifa and places in which there are a lot of Arabs, they don't care. They see these Arabs who live in Israel as traitors because they dare to be part of the Israeli democracy. So that's what people around the planet don't get. They hear, oh, it's Jews versus Arabs. They think it's like two races fighting. But Israel is the democracy which has Arabs in it as part of it. It's multi-ethnical. There are people from all over the world. That's another mistake that Hamas did when they attacked that festival. They didn't realize that many of the people they kidnapped were actually tourists and people from other countries, citizens of many other countries, which is why the governments of those countries are now in favor of Israel, because their own citizens were murdered or kidnapped. And so most of these countries are all saying great Hamas. So Hamas did a very stupid thing. They didn't just attack Jews, they attacked people of many different nationalities and all of that. And they kidnapped people from other countries as well. And now they cry and want humanitarian aid. And I agree with the decision to give them as little as possible, as long as they don't release at least some of the hostages, or at least show what's happening with them, show a sign of life, that they're not being harmed, that they're not tortured. Show something of them. Let the Red Cross visit them. Something. They don't care. Hamas is doing every possible war crime imaginable. And not just war crimes. They did literal crimes against humanity. What they did in that attack on October 7th, they literally killed little children, little babies, tortured people, burned people alive. We have evidence that they tied them up. People were not just burned after they died or something. No, they burned them, they tied them up and then burned them together. And it's still impossible to identify all the bodies. We still don't know exactly who got killed and who got kidnapped, because there were just so many. We couldn't keep up. We couldn't identify all the bodies before they rotted. And some of them were so mutilated they couldn't be identified. And so it's just horrible stuff. So it's not just war crimes. It's crimes against humanity, what they did. And they did it deliberately. So it's not the same thing. Okay, some of our rockets may hit some civilians and kill them. But it's not the intention to do it. So it's not the same as what they did. They tied little kids together and burned them alive. So who is the more immoral side? Who's the one who started it? None of this would be happening if they didn't attack Israel. What did they think will happen to their own people? They don't care about their own people. That's the problem. They hide behind their own people. They're willing to sacrifice their own people. They think they all go to heaven because of that. That's the problem. They don't think logically. They think religiously. They think, oh, we'll sacrifice our life to fight Israel and we'll go to heaven. So there is nothing stopping them. So there is no way to negotiate with them. We can only kill those people who think that way. Again, I'm not saying to kill civilians, but all the people who actually led the attacks, all the people who are actually fighting Israel are all Hamas. And so I don't have any pity with them. And if you look at my early videos on this channel, I expressed all my political views. I said I'm all in favor of a two-state solution. I'd be willing to give up even more territory than what they asked for if I think it will actually give true peace. I'd be willing to give up a lot of things for the sake of peace. I'll be giving up more than what they ask for. And that's something I was arguing people in my own country for. I was hoping that we can reach a peaceful solution and not get to where we are now. And I was talking with people on both sides. I was talking with Arabs, I was talking with Jews in Israel, and always trying to bring them together to bridge the gap and to have common goal of, okay, what will the solution, the political solution look like? How can we live together? How can we set up a system that will avoid conflict? So I'm all for that. I was always pro-peace and against war, and I don't want war. No one wants war on our side. And I was arguing with people, trying to convince them, oh, you should support the two-state solution, you should support giving up territories. And maybe I was wrong, because if the other side is not willing to make the same concessions, if they're not willing to give up their dreams of conquering 100% of the land and all of that, and so how can we negotiate with that? No matter what we give them, even if we give them 90% of everything, they still want the remaining 10%, and they'll keep attacking us anyway. And so what's the point of trying to negotiate with them? So maybe I was wrong to be so hopeful. I really thought that peace would be possible, but now I think it will probably be like in a very distant future, like 100 years from now. After all the people alive today will be gone, and no one will remember what happened, what they did to us, and what we were forced to do to them. After everyone are replaced, maybe then we can negotiate something. But in the near future, I'm sorry to say, there is no peaceful solution. There can be only war. And those people who say, oh, you cannot defeat an ideology, and all of that, you cannot destroy an idea. Okay, but we can destroy the ability of that ideology to attack us. Okay, and Nazism was also an ideology. So you cannot destroy the idea of Nazism. There will always be some new Nazis who pop up, but at least they don't have a whole country. They don't have a military machine, because that was destroyed. So the same thing here with Hamas, which is the same as Al-Qaeda and ISIS and all those terrorist groups who were destroyed eventually, even though the idea is still around, but they do not have the resources and manpower and ability to attack people. And so the same should be done with Hamas. There simply is no other choice. Despite all the efforts to simply defend, and with all the technology and all the resources put into the defense, it's still not enough, because they keep coming and they keep attacking and trying to kill every civilian in Israel. So the duty of the government and the military is to defend our own civilians first. So even if we have to kill some civilians on the other side who refuse to evacuate, but we have to do it because that's where their missiles are, that's where the Hamas headquarters are, and we have to hit those places. I don't see any other choice. If anyone has a better idea of how to deal with it, let me know. And the peaceful negotiations will not work with them, because it's the same as negotiating with Hitler. It might buy you some time, it might buy you some temporary peace, which is what Israel was doing in the last 15 years, which was a mistake. Every time there was a round of fighting, there was a ceasefire, and then after a year or two, Hamas violated it again and attacked Israel again. So any ceasefire will be temporarily anyway. So it's better off to keep going and to simply take control of the territory and prevent any attacks, and simply let them run out of rockets, let them run out of water in the tunnel, so they'll have to come out, and just defeat them. And the same will have to be done with Hezbollah if they keep attacking Israel like they're doing, and for some reason Israel is tolerating it even too much, in my opinion. Because I literally sat under a rocket fire just yesterday. I was outside, and there was a siren, and there was like half a minute, and I hear booms, and luckily it was the Iron Dome, which knocked out all those missiles, but it was very unpleasant, to see little children and women running around and lying on the floor, and women covering their babies under them, and all of that is just horrible, and we're supposed to live like that, and we're not allowed to respond. What a silly idea. And maybe Israel is partially responsible, because we should have been much tougher from the get-go. Even when they fired the first rocket at an Israeli city, we should have responded as if that rocket killed 100 civilians, because that's what they're trying to do. And this whole thing started, when I was a little child. There was the first Gulf War, and Saddam Hussein was firing rockets at Israel because the United States attacked Iraq, because Iraq invaded Kuwait, and so to punish the United States, Iraq fired rockets at Israel. And Saddam had chemical weapons back then, which he did have back then. He did use it on the Kurds and other places, and so Israel generally thought that he might throw chemical weapons or biological weapons at us. And so we were forced to sit not just in shelters, but with gas masks on us. And I was just a little kid back then, and even now, if I just smell, black rubber, the same as those masks were made of, if I smell a thick black rubber anywhere, it physically makes me sick. Not psychologically, I physically have the reaction of feeling sick from that smell. And because of the trauma of when I was a little kid, and I had to be waken up in the middle of the night and taken to a shelter and put the gas mask on me, which wasn't comfortable, and all that caused severe trauma to me. And back then Israel was not retaliating, because the United States was attacking Iraq, and they asked Israel, oh, please don't respond, because we're in a coalition with other Arab countries, and if you join the strikes, those Arab countries will not support us, and so please just take it, please sit back and not respond to all those rockets fired at you. Eventually there was no gas attack, and there was no gas in those rockets, but it was still very unpleasant for the population. People literally died from heart attacks because of the pressure of it and all of that. And so that was my early experience. And later on there was the peace negotiations with the Palestinians, and I remember watching TV and thinking how nice it is that there will be no more war anymore, that we'll have a peace with the Arabs and all of that, how nice it is. And then they started their terror attacks against Israel, and it was always Hamas doing that. Whenever Israel and Palestinians were close to signing any agreement, Hamas terrorists were deliberately sabotaging it by attacking our civilians. So all the suicide bombers, blowing up buses, restaurants, and forcing Israel to retaliate, and then it sabotaged the peace plan. And the same thing now, because Israel was about to sign a peace treaty with Saudi Arabia, and that was part of the reason that Hamas chose to attack Israel now, knowing that it will disrupt those plans. And Iran is behind all of it. That's a known fact as well, that Iran simply hates Israel mostly for religious ideological reasons, and that's why they're doing all of this. So what a waste of life, not just on our side, but on all sides. And what a waste of resources. Just imagine how much money all these wars cost. With the same amount of money, we could have solved all the other problems easily. Even if there's, not enough territory in Israel, we could have built artificial islands in the sea to build the higher towers, and we could have solved literally all problems on all sides with the same amount of money we're wasting on war. But we have no choice. Israel is being attacked. What can we do? We tried being on the defensive. We saw where it got us. It's not enough. So I'm sorry, but there is no other choice. And personally speaking, in all the suicide attacks, which also killed thousands of people, and I was lucky that I never personally lost anyone to any of these wars. I didn't personally know anyone who got killed. I did know friends who lost friends, and I didn't personally lost one. But in the recent attack, in that musical festival, I did know someone. It was a lady friend, and she got killed. And for a few days, her family didn't know if she got killed or she got kidnapped. And it was almost a relief to find out that she was killed, because if she was kidnapped, then we'll never know what happened. Like, is she being tortured somewhere? Is she still there? We would never have known what happened to them. And so those who got killed were, in a sick way, they were the lucky ones, because it's better off, and at least the family can now mourn and move on. It ends for them. But those families whose loved ones got kidnapped and they don't know what's happening with them, there is no sign of life from them, that's just terrible, because they keep having the hope that they will get released, and so it will probably take years, and they'll never know what is happening to their loved one. So that's just terrible psychological terrorism. That's exactly what they wanted to do. The Hamas, they do psychological terror. They want people to leave the country. They want people to run away to other countries, because that's how they win. And so they want to terrorize us. That's probably why they had to not just kill people, but they had to mutilate them and torture them and kill them in the most horrible ways imaginable to make us scared, to live in this country. And so that friend of mine, she has two little children. One of them just went to first grade, and they will now grow up without a mother. Their mother got killed by terrorists, and they have no mother anymore. So that's just terrible. And the other side is also, I am sorry for the civilians on the other side. I am sure there are some people who did not want any of this, and they are the victims. So I'm sorry for them as well. But who is to blame for the situation? Who started this war? Hamas did, and so they should blame Hamas. They shouldn't blame Israel. And I know some of them will blame Israel. Oh, Israeli rocket killed my family, and so I was a child back then. Now I'll grow up also to be a terrorist. Well, maybe you should be more clever than that. Maybe you should look at the whole situation and look exactly what happened, and don't join a terrorist organization, which will just make your lives even worse. So all those people who say, oh, you shouldn't strike them so hard because then they'll grow up to be terrorists too. But again, what is your solution? So what should we do? How can we avoid that? We in Israel, we grew up on stories of the Holocaust and all of that, because most people in Israel are relatives of Holocaust survivors whose whole families got killed, and all the stories of the pogroms against Jews. But I never imagined that can happen again nowadays, that it will happen inside of Israel. And what they did when they went into Israeli cities and literally did even worse things than the Nazis did. And that's something that cannot be forgiven. That's not something that we can just, okay, let's just forgive and make peace now. So I'm sorry, all those people involved in that, in not just war crimes, but crimes against humanity, every single one of who was responsible or connected to that should be killed, in my opinion. There is no other way. There's a limit to how much we can forgive. And for many years we kind of pitied the Hamas and the Palestinians because they were weaker than us, and so they were constantly trying to attack us but not succeeding because we are more powerful. And so we have to keep pitying them and try not to kill them because they are so weak and pathetic. And yet they always try to do what they just did. There were stories of some terrorists who managed to get into an Israeli village and kill the whole family, including babies, the Fugel family, for example. All those horrible stories, but they were always in small doses. Like it's just, oh, it's just one terrorist, and always there was the excuse says, oh, it's just a crazy person. He's just one of many. It doesn't mean that all of them are like that. It's just one crazy person who got in and killed all these babies, and so we cannot blame all the Palestinians and all of that. And I agreed with that personally. I said, okay, that's a crazy person. No sane person will do that. But now what happened now proved that it's not the case. That maybe not all of them, but many of them are the same way. They just couldn't do it. They couldn't succeed because we were stronger and we had good defenses. And so only once in a while they were able to do it. But now thousands of them went in and killed thousands of people on our side in horrible, brutal ways. So that proved to us it's not just a minority of those terrorists who will do that. That all of them are willing to do that kind of thing. And there were a few instances that I remember in the first day when I heard about all of this. I thought, okay, maybe not all of them are so evil, because there were a few stories that someone did let go of a few babies or a few little children on the border. They decided not to take them, not to kidnap them. And so I remember thinking, okay, maybe some of them are not totally evil. Maybe some of them still have some humanity. But what did it turn out later? That they were filming that. They filmed that release of that woman and a few kids. They filmed it for their propaganda purposes, to show as if they're not so evil. So the fact they filmed it proved to me that that was planned, and it was not out of the kindness of their heart. They only did it for propaganda purposes. The same as they released like two old ladies, because I guess they thought they were going to die anyway without their medicine. The two extremely old ladies who they kidnapped, they released them out of some gesture or something. So they sometimes do that kind of thing, but not out of the goodness of their heart, but because they are thinking about propaganda purposes, which was always part of their strategy. They always try to make themselves look like the victim. They're always hiding behind civilians, so that those civilians will be killed, so they can blame Israel, so that people around the planet will blame Israel and force Israel for a ceasefire, and that way they win. So they keep doing that, and we cannot allow it to work. Just because they hide behind civilians shouldn't give them immunity. We should tell those civilians, simply leave, stop being a human shield, leave the area, let us deal with Hamas, or deal with them yourself, and then we can make peace with them. Give up, just surrender. Hamas should surrender, give up the hostages, all their leaders should come out, and then face trial for what they did. And then we can deal with those who are left to make some kind of peaceful solution. But as long as they're fighting us in this way and attacking our civilians, I'm sorry, but our civilians come first. If they're shooting rockets from a hospital or from a school, we're not supposed to sit back and just take it. We should take out any missile base. And so that's my opinion. I'm sorry if I sound too harsh, but I am kind of angry. And if you had seen what they actually did, you'd realize who we're dealing with, and we have no other choice. Like, they literally did crimes against humanity and medieval things which I didn't imagine can happen in the 21st century. So anyone who deliberately did things like that should be destroyed, in my opinion. So that's all I have to say for today, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.